when you're in pain, soothing as a springtime rain, to have a friend right in your corner. Your heart will feel a little warmer. Tender loving care, tender loving care. Each warm and friendly touch lets someone know you care so much. Tender loving care, tender loving care.
Good evening, I'm Dr. Greenbrier Almond, and thank you for joining us on our program, Tender Loving Care. Each week on Channel 3, I've been happy to talk about this interface between Christianity and medicine, now starting on 39 years. We began back in 1977 and continue today, and it's a blessing to talk about health and Christianity, and of course, how can we stay healthy in body, mind, and spirit. I would start off tonight by saying that my mother was right, that eating fruits and vegetables is a good idea. I grew up with that, and mother was a preacher's kid. My grandfather was a Methodist minister and used to do these 30-day revival services in the Methodist Church, and she came to Wesleyan and studied home ec and biology, and was a advocate for proper diet and exercise and health measures, as well as a strong component for the Christian faith. And so I owe a great deal of what I'm going to say tonight to my mother, who, by the way, if she were still alive, would be having a birthday in March the 15th. But I'm going to take some information from the Joyful Noise Letter. This is from time to time when I give a program, I like to use reference material because people may want to go back and read articles. And there's going to be a book coming out, The Physically Fit Messiah. This is a compilation of 30 years of articles that the Joyful Noise Letter has been publishing. The Joyful Noise Letter, by the way, is published in Michigan for 30 years, and they have, I'll try to give a blog or an address here in case you'd like to check it out. Its address is up in Portage, Michigan, and don't offhand see an email address, but if you Google that, I'm sure you'll come up with the Joyful Noise Letter. And but the idea is that Christianity and medicine and health have gone together, and that's why it's a good program for our interface as we talk about it on our program. Usually when I am referencing the Joyful Noise Letter, I'm doing it for the humor. I had a Catholic patient when I first came to practice in Buchanan, and she gave me a subscription to the Joyful Noise Letter, and I've continued to subscribe to it all these years because of the Christian jokes. But tonight, this is a rather serious program because health is important. And there's a couple points you can make right out of the chute here. One is that the Seventh-day Adventist Church, which has a branch, has a church here in Buchanan, out on the Brushy Fork Road, as a denomination, they have been growing 1 million members a year. This is at the same time that other denominations, certain Baptist, Methodist, Presbyterian, others, have been losing membership. And 1 million members a year is a lot in the United States, cross currents to what's happening generally. And part of the reason is put forth here in the Joyful Noise Letter, and part of it, as my own experience, is that they do talk a lot about health, diet, exercise, health, and vitality, and that role in the Christian faith. Do you not know that your body is the temple of the Holy Spirit? One of the statements of Apostle Paul that I quote to my patients over the past 41 years of practice, getting people interested who have a spiritual life and are interested in body health. What else can you observe? I visit my daughter and my son out of town where they live, and there are certain supermarkets that we go to in their communities. For example, the Earth Fare is one that's in Michigan, and they are talking about organic food. Now, this is not just Earth Fare. Also, my wife shops at Kroger's generally, but other grocery stores. As she shops, she's looking for organic food, and we try to get food without any additives, no antibiotics, no hormones, and as healthy as we can. And that movement is growing. People are paying a lot extra, in some cases, for food, but many supermarkets like that chains are growing. The Earth Fare, and I'm trying to look up data here, is headquartered in Asheville, North Carolina. They have 40 cities, 10 different states at this point. We've also shopped when we're out of town at Trader Joe's, and I like that supermarket. I didn't realize how big a chain it was. There are now 418 stores, 85 million people shopping there every year. We have over 300 million people in America, so that's a sizable group. And their headquarters is Monrovia, California. What are they talking about? They're talking about healthy foods, fresh foods, fruits and vegetables. And so people have an interest in that. Even as I was coming out here tonight to do this program locally here on Channel 3, I was listening to the public radio news, and they talked about a growing imbalance in lifespan. Those who are more educated, well off, and if this are increasing their length of their life. The poorer people in America, maybe those who are not eating as well, are not growing in lifespan at this time. Interesting. No one can explain it except, as I want to do, from thinking about this from again, the interface between Christianity and medicine, that it has something to do with faith, it has something to do with proper diet. Jesus himself, and go back to the principle of this new book, The Physically Fit Messiah, Jesus himself did a lot of walking with his disciples, as is recorded in his 3 years of ministry. He ate, presumably, it would be a Mediterranean diet. It is a very healthy diet that you can Google and get more details about this, but Jesus would have eaten an equivalent of that in Israel at that time, and it's recorded, that they would be getting wheat from the fields, and of course he described himself as the bread of heaven, bread of life. I am the bread of life, and he used examples of healthy food to even describe himself, the living water, healthy water. In the news lately, you've heard the story up in Michigan. There's a city that has lead in their water, and unfortunately the children are sick, and a horrible thing. But obviously healthy food, healthy water leads to healthy life. So what can we say then about this from a spiritual standpoint? To try to tie the two together. I began with that quote from the Apostle Paul, and this is in 1 Corinthians 6th chapter, the 19th and 20th verse. Paul's admonition is, do you not know that your body is the temple of the Holy Spirit within you, which you have from God? So glorify God in your body. I'll tell a personal story about this. When I was in medical school, I had a chance, as every doctor does, and part of their training, to work on a cadaver. And you learn the parts of the body, and even now as a doctor, and I have had a chance to donate my body someday to the medical school, and I presume that they may use it as a cadaver. I won't need the body someday, and anyway, it's a learning experience prized by medical students, and my cadaver I called Chingamcook, the last of the Mohegans, and it was an Indian. I happened to realize that it was an American Indian, and appreciated the chance to operate this body and learned anatomy, gross anatomy we called it. But what I also realized is this person was very obese, and it was very hard to operate on them, especially to go into the omentum and study, separate muscles out and so forth. And I made a personal vow to myself, based on first of all on the scriptures, on this very verse. Do you not know that your body is the temple of the Holy Spirit within you, which you have from God? So glorify God in your body. I said, I don't want to gain weight. I don't want to disfigure my body. And so I consciously exercised, watched what I ate, tried to take care of my body, because I realized someday my intention was to give it to someone to study. And I wanted them to have a specimen that they could easily work off. It's a strange thing. That's a doctor's story. That's how doctors think about these things. But also, another experience happened to me, and it ties this back to that interface between Christianity and medicine. We had a Dr. Burkett from Africa. He was a missionary doctor, actually originally from Scotland, but he went to Africa as a missionary, as a surgeon. And he expected, as a general surgeon, to operate on gallbladders and appendixes and maybe bowel cancer and other diseases of the gut, as is common here in Western culture in the United States and England. But instead, when he got to England, he had no operations like that. It just was an unheard of thing. And he was surprised. Of course, he had other treatments, wounds and other things to care for as a surgeon. But then he began to say, why is there a difference? And he made an observation which was profound. I mean, he was winning all sorts of medical prizes for his research, and he was traveling the world giving talks to medical students and traveling all over, including West Virginia University. But what he observed is that the diet of the African included all sorts of fruits and vegetables, and it was different from the Western diet. And he was making that observation, and he said that has something to do with not having some of the diseases that we have. It's what you eat is how healthy you're going to be, and he's right. That's proven correct over the years. If you have more fiber in your diet, you avoid even cancers. So I think it's 20% now of the bowel cancers, or less chance of bowel cancer just with fiber in the diet. And you can almost increase the fiber and decrease the risk of cancer, and of course the gallbladder and other diseases too. So all sorts of ways we can think about that body as the temple of the Holy Spirit. Now, on the other side, we should say in favor of pastors who certainly preach in our community. They preach about saving the soul, and of course being strong in mind and body and spirit and strength, and loving the Lord our God with all of those together. But also, and I heard a Methodist bishop here a couple years ago give a talk here at the conference in Buchanan. He's saying to the pastors primarily at the conference that we are sick, he said, and he was referring to their health care bills because they were having trouble paying them. The conference was having trouble keeping up the cost of the insurance, and he also was lamenting, he has prayers for his own pastors and those that he knows of, and his congregations were praying for the sick in their congregations, and there were many sick, and he was lamenting that, and he was saying wisely, I think, we could do better. Exercise, diet, care of our body would be important. First, we should go clear back now to the first hospital was actually a Christian invention of sorts. If you go back to the Old Testament and to other cultures, the Assyrians and other people, the Egyptians, they didn't really have hospitals like we have now. But Christians themselves, and this was in the 3rd century, they began to have in Greece hospitals as we commonly know them, and they did it as a part of their ministry. And so since then, and we can see here, we have a Catholic hospital in our town. Missionary sisters have come over from Germany over 100 years ago and established St. Joseph's Hospital, and the Palatine Sisters had 4 hospitals in West Virginia. That would just be an example of how Christians have gone into healthcare in a big way. The Union Protestant Hospital, when I was growing up, was the big hospital in Clarksburg. It became United Hospital, combined with the Catholic Hospital, and of course now it's United Hospital and is a part of West Virginia University. But in the beginning, it was a Christian organization, both of the hospitals in Clarksburg at that time. Another way to look at this, we have a Franciscan monk, or at least honoring the Franciscan monk as St. Francis as the current Pope. Pope is allowed to take a name of a previous saint and as their name, and so our current Pope has taken St. Francis as his name, Pope Francis. And the Franciscans were very much into health. And in the 12th century, they were renowned for their healing ministry to the poor. And they preached a lot about healing the sick, about prayer, about fasting, medicinal herbs, exhorting people to have a healthy lifestyle. All those things are wise and make a difference. Again, when I was in medical school, we were studying various illnesses, and I took extra GI service. I was interested in the gastrointestinal tract, and I even thought about being a gastroenterologist at one point in my life, and took an extra month of that in my senior year. But what I could realize, among other things, as we go into the Lenten season, which is we're on the journey of Lent now, part of the 6 weeks leading up to Easter, and it's a time. Again, my mother taught us, our family, to deny ourselves something, chocolate or fast or whatever we may deny ourselves. But there's a health benefit to it, a direct health benefit. The gut actually works better if we let it fast once a week, say 1 day a week. That could be, of course, Sunday, the Sabbath day. Maybe many people would choose to do that. Then they wouldn't eat out in a restaurant. They wouldn't force other people to work to serve them. And other people fast on other days once a week. And people who do that, again, whether it's in our community, Seventh-day Adventists would advocate for that, or other people, doctors and nurses and people who study the body, from a Christian principle or not, see the value of fasting once a week. And that's something that we learned, first of all, in the 12th century with the Franciscans, but I learned at West Virginia University as a medical student in the early 1970s. People have noticed in a small town, I walk almost every day. I used to run almost every day. Doing something like that is healthy for the body. I did it for 2 reasons in the beginning. One was I like to eat ice cream, which is not necessarily healthy, but I realized that if I could run 3 miles a day, I could have some ice cream. I would not gain weight. But beyond that, I knew that was I was training my body, running that race of life. It was a spiritual journey for me, and then I realized that there was a philosopher, Zarathustra, Nietzsche wrote, "Thus spake Zarathustra." He was not necessarily a Christian philosopher, but he had an adage, which was the runner's quote. You could buy posters with this statement from Nietzsche, that never trust an idea conceived while sitting down. And I did a lot of my creative thinking. I still do a lot of my creative thinking moving. and walking and now, but running in the past. And if I were wrestling with some issue and I got out to exercise, lo and behold, my mind seemed to be more clear, more creative, and I would come up with solutions to things that were puzzling to me, even as I took time off from my work. And I said many days, and say it over time now, that half an hour, that hour, whatever time I'm able to give to exercise, was sometimes the best time of that day. It made a great difference in my life. Well, there have been now medical studies backing this up. Almost every cardiologist will say to someone who's doing cardiac rehab after a heart attack, you have to walk. You have to do 3 miles of walking a day. That will become a goal. Well, of course, if you do that on the front end before the heart attack, you may prevent the heart attack. Again, people who are worried about obesity, which is an epidemic in our society, then 3 miles a day has been the studied amount. That's not to say that 4 miles isn't more healthy or 5 miles isn't more healthy, but 3 miles is what's been studied. Psychiatrists like myself have studied this for depression, anxiety and depression. That is relieved naturally by walking 3 miles a day, or some equivalency like that. It can be exercising aerobic points like jogging or like riding a bike, and you could get there. 6 miles on a bicycle would be 3 miles walking. You know, all these equivalencies. So much golf. I noticed the President of the United States plays a lot of golf. He's under a lot of stress. I don't begrudge him at all. Exercise. It helps him to be a better president. But it is healthy to do exercise like that. John Wesley, and I follow the Methodist tradition, John Wesley advocated for all of his young pastors as he was beginning his movement, which became a major denomination. He said 3 miles a day, 3 hours a day, 3 hours a day in the sunshine, out exercising, riding a horse, walking, 3 hours a day was what John Wesley advocated. And he wrote the leading textbook of his time. It was called the Primitive Physic. The reason he wrote this textbook was not to earn a lot of money to give to the church necessarily, but he saw that health care was being limited to the rich, to those who could pay for it. Not unlike people who have insurance here in this culture, and then others who don't have it. There's still 30 million people or more without insurance in our country. But he realized that there were those who needed a boost. They needed to be healthy, but they couldn't afford to go to a doctor. So he wrote his book, and it became the leading bestseller of his time, The Primitive Physic, it was called. And he talked about practical ways that we can stay healthy, what we can eat, exercise and rest and things of this nature, as well as practical treatments for common ailments. And it's a good idea. It's a good idea. I remember talking to Peace Corps workers. We have on my wife's island in the Philippines, we have 3 or 4 Peace Corps workers at a time on the island. And then Jay Liotta of our community went to Mongolia as a Peace Corps worker. Emily Rupp went to Ghana and Africa as a Peace Corps worker. Many idealistic people have done that. And when they do that, they often take a medical textbook, practical medical textbook, not unlike what John Wesley published, but what can you do in a setting where you have no doctor? How can you set the bone? How can you stop the bleeding? How can you deal with an infection? Things of that nature. And so a practical textbook like that, everyone should have in their home, really. And John Wesley was one of the first to do that. I would like to talk a little bit about Ellen White, and have a few minutes here, and Dr. Kellogg. These were of the Seventh-day Adventist movement, and Adventists were talking a lot about diet, primarily a vegetarian diet. I understand that there's Adventist, you can buy Adventist approved food. I don't know how they do that. It's not kosher in that sense, but healthy food. They have there are 6 places in the world where people live longer than any other place, And one of them is out in California around one of the medical centers that the Adventists operate. People primarily in that location following the Adventist principles of diet and exercise and health. And lo and behold, not necessarily genetically different from the rest of us, but clearly living longer than any of the rest of us in America. The other places in the world are in some places in the Mediterranean, where again they follow the Mediterranean diet, or other places of the world where they seem to have discovered a particular diet or exercise pattern that leads to longevity. One of the, and I used to eat Kellogg cornflakes all the time, so I think it has something to do with Dr. John Harvey Kellogg, a medical doctor and surgeon, an Adventist, and he promoted a lot about the natural vegetarian diet and regular exercise, and started the Battle Creek Sanatorium in Michigan. And I think around that area is where they raise a lot of their grain that the Kellogg folks sell for cereal. So that's a healthy part of life. I have a great interest as a member of the school board. I'll close maybe with this thought. For our own community to begin to raise healthy foods. One of the healthiest foods there is a strawberry. And we have a natural climate for the strawberry, natural soil for the strawberry. And so it's not just vitamin E and fiber and it's a fresh fruit and vegetable, but it's a very, very healthy fruit that we can have easily here. Likewise, the future of West Virginia probably is farming, truck farming. We have, with a 1 day's drive, to 75% of the nation's population. We have the water supply. We could be raising a lot more food, and I would suggest we would do it in an organic way, without a lot of chemicals, without a lot of fertilizer, certainly no antibiotics, and we would be raising that food, maybe selling it into Trader Joe's and Whole Earth organizations, which would be selling it in their grocery stores, but we could do that here locally. And finally, Patch Adams. I visited Patch Adams' place over in Pocahontas County. He has a 320-acre farm, and he's advocating for diet, exercise, laughter. He's a clown, of course, and they had the Patch Adams movie, which was a big hit several years ago. And his hospital and clinic is right here in West Virginia, and you can, of course, go over to visit that just in Pocahontas County. So this is close to home and not so mysterious, but I'm glad to be talking about it after nearly 40 years, still talking about the same thing, but because it needs to be said, and none of us can really be too healthy, can we? Our body is the temple of the Holy Spirit. We honor God with what we put in our body, with the exercise we do, with how what we look at with our eyes, what we hear with our ears, and I hope that the message is getting through tonight. Well, until the next time, this is Dr. Greenbrier Almond, thanking you for joining us on our program, Tender Loving Care. Look forward again, as God allows, into the future, talking about tender loving care. See you next week.
Stories of a West Virginia Doctor, written by Dr. Harold D. Allman. A collection of 55 short stories about his experience as a small-town doctor in central West Virginia. And Tender Loving Care, Stories from a West Virginia Doctor, Volume 2, written by Dr. Greenbrier Allman, using videotapes to write 70 additional stories of his father's very colorful life as a small-town doctor. They can be found for purchase at Amazon.com and most local bookstores. Tune into Channel 3 Buckhannon for Tender Loving Care with Dr. Greenbrier Allman, where he talks about the connection between Christianity and medicine.